Hi, I'm Dr. Andrew Chappell, and I'm going to talk to you today about dieting for fat loss or weight loss and the lessons that I have learned from working with athletes in physique sports. So I'm primarily interested in bodybuilders and bodybuilding populations. However, lots of these lessons you can utilize for other athletic populations as well. So the same rules still apply when it comes to sprinting, for example, so athletes involved in athletics. But the same rules also apply for if you're working with sort of general population as well. Now, their ability to apply many of these lessons might differ from the extremeness that we see in bodybuilding, and the end goal might not be to have 3% body fat, because that can actually be detrimental for performance. But there's lots of good lessons in here, and I hope you will enjoy my presentation. Now, at any point, if you'd like, I would suggest pausing the presentation and having a look at some of the research which I'm presenting as well. So go away, have a look at the studies which you'll see outlined in here, and go and check out the references. I would encourage you to do that rather than just taking my word for it. Many of the studies that I'm utilizing as well are representative of a particular area as well, to sort of illustrate a point. Okay, without any further ado, let's get into this and go from here. Okay, so what we're hopefully going to talk about here is understanding the advantages and disadvantages of different weight loss concepts and strategies. Understand how we can manipulate macronutrients and micronutrients. And I'm going to talk about diet diversity, food types, and how these things can influence your weight loss prospects. So, weight loss and fat loss, okay? Thing we have to realize when we're talking about athletic populations, what we really want to do is not only do we want to often reduce the weight on the scale, but we often also want to reduce the body fat percentage as well, because having more muscle mass or a higher ratio of muscle to fat very often leads to an improvement in performance, right? People might want to temporarily reduce their body weight, and that's why we've got something here like a weight loss sauna. Very, very common amongst people who are, like, say, doing UFC fighting or judo, and jockeys do this a lot as well. So they'll temporarily reduce their weight and then they'll increase their weight again for the fight. But obviously the other fighters are often doing the same thing. So you think, why don't they just fight at the same weight? But very often what we're trying to do is we're trying to lose body fat rather than just losing weight, and create smaller people with the same fat mass ratio, because very often, like I say, it's linked to performance. Now, the point I've made here is don't always expect weight loss strategies between different sports to make sense. So that example I gave you about the fighters dropping weight only for them both to gain weight doesn't make any sense. And you think, well, why don't they both just either fight at a heavier weight, or why don't they just keep themselves in shape for a longer period of time so they don't have to drop the weight, which might negatively affect their performance? It doesn't always make sense what people do across different sports and different cultures. Some of it is endemic. Sometimes in fighting, people like to sit in saunas and things like this because they like to feel like they're gaining a psychological advantage over their opponent based on how much they can sweat and how much they can endure. So we've got that. The mantra in cycling, running, swimming, triathlon, things like that is that light is fast, even though that might mean that they go past the point at which their power to weight ratio is actually reduced. So they might be shredding muscle just in the pursuit of getting lighter. So we have to factor these things as well. It doesn't always necessarily make sense. But generally speaking, we're looking to improve our muscle mass to fat mass ratio when we'll talk about losing weight. There's lots of advantages of being lighter. So you see improved flexibility, power to weight ratios. You might improve your reach, for example, if you're taller and you're heavier, if you get in a lighter division when it comes to fighting sports. Improvement in health and well-being. Certainly, if you're a very heavy individual, then you see an improvement in your health, and lots of retired strongmen and bodybuilders and powerlifters and things like that often downsize once they're finished the sport. You're certainly much more marketable, and your image might matter to you much more, so that might be a reason why you want to improve your fat mass ratio, which might have a financial incentive as well. Culture matters, so certain sports you spend a lot of time with your top off, outside, etc. So maybe if you're doing beach volleyball, that matters much more to you, or CrossFit, where there's a culture of taking your shirt off, compared to, say, like a rugby, where you're maybe obviously more covered up, or you're the goalie in football where you're wearing long sleeves. So there's lots of different reasons why you might decide to improve your body fat ratios beyond just a competitive advantage. But the question is, what's the best way to do this? Now, there's lots of different strategies you could utilize, and hence why I've got the chess game, the chess piece down at the bottom here, because there's lots of different ways in which you could approach this. Time is very often one of the most decisive factors, because if you need to lose weight quickly or acutely, that influences the approach you're going to take, and that also might influence the amount of muscle mass that you keep from your time-based approach. If you've got a long time, you can preserve that muscle. If you've got a short time, you can't necessarily preserve that muscle. Situation matters. So are you coming back from a sports injury? Do you have a fight? Are you trying to make a different division? What's your experience? What's your starting point in terms of your current body fat levels? What are your genetics as well? Some people are just good at losing weight and keeping muscle mass on, so they can play a different game, right? But we should always look to manage the expectations of the athlete and be realistic with what we can achieve, because nothing will get you into more hot water with an athlete or a potential client than promising the earth and then completely under-delivering, right? That's how you will lose clients, lose athletes, and everyone will get upset. So I mentioned this in previous lectures, and I always bring this up. The strategy you're going to utilize will depend on the circumstances. So just like any craftsman or builder, the challenge that you're facing will bring up the need for a different tool. Okay, so we need to look into our sports nutrition toolkit and think, what do we need to use under certain circumstances? Does it make sense to go water cutting? Does it make sense to do a high carb diet, low carb diet, low fat diet? It just really does depend on the circumstance, and that will influence the approach to take. Now, the best strategy. Well, if you look at advice for the general population from the National Institute of Clinical Excellence or the National Institute of Health, if you look at the NHS, National Health Service, and if you look in the literature, all of it really comes down to this. The expectation is that you'll make around about a 500 to 1,000 calorie deficit in someone's diet to facilitate around about 1 to 2 pounds weight loss a week. The best strategy to do that is the one that works best with an individual's lifestyle. What are their preferences? What have they tried in the past? What works well? What can they tolerate, right? So what that means is they could have high fat diet, low fat diet, high carb diet, low carb diet, paleo diet, miss breakfast, do fasting. There's lots of different ways in which you can achieve that calorie deficit. And very often the advantage of the weight loss probably outweighs any short-term negative effect of being on that particular diet. So this has changed in the last 20 years. This is probably your best bet. It means that you can do lots of different things with individuals, and it's really science-based. Okay, So here's some popular strategies. We've got keto, paleo, carnivore, low carb, intermittent fasting. The way they all work, it's a calorie deficit. They all just do different things to help you get that calorie deficit. Now that's weight loss. But fat loss is different. Like I say, we're not just trying to create small humans. We want muscular humans. Performance also matters. Okay? So if we want people to perform at their best, e.g. sprint, jump, run, endurance, lifting weights, fighting, whatever it is, the diet type can matter then. It's not talking about weight loss. We talk about preserving muscle mass. We're talking about performance outcomes. The type of diet you follow will matter. It makes a difference. Okay, so with that in mind, how do you lose weight? Well, I talked about it briefly in another slide, right? If we work out that a kilo of fat is 9,000 calories, and that's based on 1 gram of fat giving you 9 calories, and we go with that 500 to 1,000 calorie recommendation, over 7 days, that should create a deficit of around about 3,500 calories or 7,000 calories. And that will yield that £1 to £2 weight per week. And then that will give us over 20 weeks, something in the region of 8 to 10 kilograms, maybe more, and that's £20, right? And that's based on this classic calories in, calories out model, right? The question is it really that simple? Well, here's the thing. I raise the question because it's not that simple. So the first thing we need to do is we need to understand that we need to measure people's energy demands. And doing that's tricky. So this is a paper that I've published where I measured the energy requirements, amongst other things, of bodybuilding populations, people who are trying to lose a lot of body fat. And we used lots of different equations to try and predict what their energy requirements are, something called basal metabolic rate. And these equations, what they do is they estimate metabolic rate based on height, weight, gender, muscle mass, etc., based on two methods, indirect calorimetry and direct calorimetry. So you've got a breath by breath analysis, so you put a mask on someone, measure their breathing rate, and then you've got a metabolic chamber whereby you can measure heat production and you can measure gas as well. And that will give you an indication of what people's calorie requirements are, and that's what your equations are based on. The problem with this stuff is that when it comes to people's equations, they're not terribly accurate. So we found that there was an overestimation and an underestimation by as much as 911 calories or an underestimation of 617 calories. The average was somewhere between 267 calories. So the problem is being able to have a starting point and say, someone has this many calories, we need to create a deficit of this much. It becomes difficult to match that 8 to 10 kilograms of weight loss if you don't know how many calories someone needs for a start. So that's tricky. That's tricky. And that's one of the reasons why people don't get the results that they often think that they're going to get, right? And you can use lots of different energy requirement estimates. The other thing is when it comes to energy requirement estimation, that is made up of several components. So you've got your muscle mass, you've got fat mass, you've got organ size, you've got your age, all these sort of things coming in here. But the other component we've got to estimate is what are people's physical activity levels, which is tricky to get an accurate estimation of. So you can use a watch, which will tell you how many calories you burn, but these are not terribly accurate as well. And this can account for differences between what people think they are consuming, what people, in terms of energy, and what they're actually doing, which can make it tricky in terms of facilitating weight loss. So people might have to make even more severe deficits than that 500 to 1,000 if they can't estimate correctly. The other problem is that the calories in, calories out model isn't actually true. Because if you start eating less, you typically start moving less. You start burning less calories. So actually, calories in is not calories out. It's calories in changes calories out. Because what we see as people drop their calories is you see a drop in energy levels to conserve energy, heart rates drop, blood pressures drop, diet-induced thermogenesis drops, and you see changes in things like reproductive function and so on, all in a bid to minimize the loss of muscle mass and retain the organism's function. Because when you're dieting, you're essentially doing what I would call controlled starving to death. Okay? And in this thermic effect, this adaptation gets more severe the more of a deficit you create and the lower your body fat levels get. So this particular paper here says you get an adaptation of around about 120 calories on average when you create a calorie deficit. So if you imagine we've got our calorie requirements calculated, we put someone on a diet, we've underestimated how much energy they actually need, and then we get an adaptation taking place. You can see why some people just start a diet and they don't really lose much weight, or why weight loss might slow down over time. And that 120 is the average. Some people might get an adaptation of about 250 calories. So we create a 500 calorie deficit. They actually get an adaptation of 250 calories. They're only going to get half the result they think they're going to get. So calories in changes calories out. There's also something called the 1/4 rule, and this is consistent across the literature. And that says that for every quarter of body weight we lose, quarter of that will be fat-free mass. Now, fat-free mass includes things like bones, mineral components, fluids, but it also contains muscle mass as well. Now, we really want to minimize that because, like I said, we don't want to just create small human beings. So muscle mass retention is extremely important. And if we adjust our macronutrient intake, maintain good food quality, optimize recovery, and avoid overtraining, then this will preserve that muscle. And some studies have shown that actually you can really mitigate that 1/4 down to next to nothing as well. But again, like I say, the more weight you're losing, the lower your calories are, the lower your body fat gets, the more side effects you're likely to see, more adaptation you're likely to see, and the more risk you are at of losing muscle mass. Things like a high protein diet can offset that issue. Lifting weights can obviously offset that issue. And maybe the type of cardio you do can offset that issue. So here's an example of this. These are bodybuilders training for 12 weeks. 5 females getting ready for an event. And over time, what they've done is they've lost in total 4.22 kilograms of fat mass. But over the course of their diet, they've also lost 1.34 kilograms of fat-free mass. Now, obviously, if they could retain that fat-free mass, then that is advantageous for their bodybuilding contest because the more muscle they've got, the more impressive they will look on the stage. So here's an example of your 1/4 rule, or in this case here, you're getting close to just over 1/5. The same is true in this study here. This is another 12-week study. What we've got here is 6 male bodybuilders, 12 weeks of dieting. Fat-free mass has gone down by 2.4 kilograms. Fat mass went down by 4.9 kilograms. The ratio of fat-free mass to fat mass has increased. So they've made an improvement there, but again, they have lost fat-free mass. And again, they will look more impressive if they can retain that. They've gone from 82 kilograms or 82.7 kilograms down to 80 kilograms. They've lost some of that important tissue. Now, interestingly, taking anabolic steroids in this study, the athletes in question actually still lost muscle mass. So 4.45 kilograms of fat mass off, 2.46 kilograms fat-free mass loss, even with the use of anabolic steroids. And that is using different methods. So we've got underwater weighing, you've got bioelectrical impedance, and then I believe this one you've also got a DEXA scanner as well. The last example I've got here is of a natural bodybuilder who has lost 43% of his fat-free mass while getting ready for competition. So he lost, of everything he lost, 43% of it was fat-free mass. So again, some of it's total body water, but there's a sizable chunk there of muscle as well. So you can see we really want to minimize this loss of muscle mass. And the question is, can we really do it? Okay, just a summary here. Now, there's advantages to being lighter and having lower body fat. I've mentioned them already. The strategy you utilize should be context dependent, but I've already mentioned you can use lots of different approaches as long as we create a calorie deficit. It's just we have to be mindful that weight loss is not the goal, it's fat loss. Fat loss is complicated by adaptations which take place within the body. So although you might predict rates of loss, actual loss is likely to be different. Greater deficits, lower body fat, poor food choices probably all exacerbate the loss of muscle mass. And then there is something called the 1/4 rule, whereby we lose fat-free mass as we lose body weight, and this will impact our performance and our health outcomes and our appearance negatively. So we want to minimize this. Okay, so what's the best way to lose weight, right? Well, let's talk about energy intake to start with. We've got two examples here. You've got the strength and power pyramid, and then you've got Alan Aragon's big picture of nutrition for health. The pyramid emphasizes the importance of energy balance. However, the pyramid by Alan Aragon with the green triangle around it emphasizes the importance of micronutrients as well and food quality. So I'm much more of a fan of this approach rather than just saying the only thing that matters is energy balance, first and foremost, because it can influence your fat-free mass and your health as well, the macronutrients and micronutrients we take. But it can still be a useful concept. Okay, so here is two papers which I published on bodybuilding populations, which informs much of my thinking. And this is on British natural bodybuilders. It's on professionals, really high level ones. I'm one of the participants in this. And I think this is really useful data because what we did with these two studies was we looked at 80 bodybuilders and we said, which ones are winning the competitions and which ones are not winning the competitions? Is there a difference in their strategy and their approach? And then we also said, okay, between the professionals and the amateurs, is there a difference between the strategies and the approach? And then is there convergence between those two? And there's also lots of other great lessons from here as well. So the first thing to take from this is weight loss in these populations, people are dieting between 20 and 28 weeks, you can see, and they're losing as a rate of loss between about 0.4 to 0.7% per week. So weight loss is slower than that 500 to 1,000 National Institute of Health suggestion, right? If you can lose it slower, that's advantageous because research into this, comparing short weight loss strategies to long-term weight loss strategies, show that across 7 studies, and this is consistent if you look across the board, that the slower weight loss strategies tend to yield more fat-free mass at the end of them, and that you lose more fat-free mass if you rapidly lose the weight. So those other studies that were 12 weeks, maybe if they'd done 20 weeks, they would have had better outcomes. The other thing we see is because more of that weight loss is coming from fat mass, because you're not losing as much fat-free mass, it favours a slower weight loss approach. So losing weight slower is typically better. Now, because muscle is metabolically active, that has a positive effect on your resting metabolic rate. So the resting metabolic rate is more negatively affected from rapid weight loss versus slower weight loss. So if you want to minimize negative adaptations, we're better off losing the weight slower purely from a physiological perspective. That's saying nothing for the psychology, because there is potentially an advantage of getting in and then getting out quickly. Diet fatigue's a thing. So we probably want to lose weight slower. However, you can do some interesting things. So this is a meta-analysis from Nutrition Reviews, which looks at 12 different studies which compared the effects of diet breaking versus traditional continuous energy restriction approaches. Okay, so what you do in this approach is you go on a diet for a very long period of time, maybe it's at 28 weeks, and over time you reduce your body fat levels. However, a diet break approach introduces periods of time whereby you reintroduce calories into your diet and back up at maintenance levels to see, can you offset some of the negative effects, such as negative effects on metabolic adaptations for your resting metabolic rate or loss of muscle mass. What the study shows is that short diet breaks or refeeds seem to be effective. So what this means is maybe you could have rapid weight loss interspersed with a diet break over the same period of time, and this might be more advantageous in the long run, certainly in obese and overweight individuals. So it gives you important context. So fat loss sprints as a concept. People do this on the micro level as well, rather than the macro level. So they have high calorie days, low calorie days. They have cheat days, refeed days. And that's a concept that we call periodized nutrition. So this definitely works, and it's an interesting way in which you might approach it. So it's not just maybe continuous energy restriction for the full period and you diet for a long time. Maybe it's interspersed with diet breaks. The thing to really say on this one is that severe dieting really is the thing that influences that calories in, calories out model. The example that you've got on here is the breakdown of metabolic rate and metabolism, where you've got physical activity, you've got energy demands in the blue, and then you've got that adaptive thermogenesis. That's the part of metabolism which is likely to see a reduction as a consequence of dieting. So you've got this sort of classical mechanical model whereby over time you maintain your energy output as you lose weight. However, the actual reality is it's probably much more like this threshold model or this spring-loaded model, whereby over time when you pass a certain threshold of fat loss, then you see an adaptation and then you get that drop in energy requirements. So it's, again, weight loss is a moving target rather than a sort of stable one. And maybe things like diet breaks can help us offset that. Okay, here's an example of this, just some of my clients. So we've got Grant up there in the top corner, and in there you've got a break whereby we dieted him for 20 weeks, all in. He's went from 97 kilograms to 85 kilograms. The period where he's stable in the middle, where I've not marked it, that's a break. And then at the end, he's got another break. I've also got Rachel there. She's gone from 75 to 60 kilograms. She did 12 weeks, had a little break in the middle, started the diet again, had another little break, and then went again. Kevin, slightly different. We did fat loss sprints with him, so we had a period of rapid weight loss that we aimed for before we reintroduced the calories. And this was really just to teach him how to lose weight. And then we did a continuous weight loss strategy after that. And then Johan, again, similar sort of strategy. We had diet breaks introduced here, and he lost the weight over time. So there's lots of different ways you can do this with individuals. Certainly Kevin's strategy absolutely worked for sure, as did the strategy for the other individuals. This is that concept of periodized nutrition, just at the micro rather than the macro level. And this is it split over the course of a week. So the yellow bars on the graphic, that is somebody's training volume. So if you imagine total number of sets, and you can see as the days go on, the sets go up. The blue bar is the daily energy or carbohydrate intake. So as the sets go up and down, so do the requirements. The dotted line would be the person's average calorie intake. The red line indicates what the predicted values are. So as long as that average intake is below that line, we should see weight loss. The other example is different ways of splitting it. So you could just go consistent across the week, higher at the weekends, variable intake, which is what this is, or maybe it's training only bias. Of course, the other way you can do this is you can do it by the day as well. You can have the calories the same in every single meal, or you could have a large meal at breakfast, smaller meals throughout the day, and then you have the larger meals close around exercising to maximize performance if we're having lower calories throughout the day. So there's lots of different ways we can periodize this approach. Other strategies. One of the big things here really is just long-term adherence. If you can get someone to stick to a plan, that's gold. And that's how you're going to get them to lose weight week after week after week and reach their target, right? So introducing concepts like large meals at the weekend or meals off or cheat meals or things like that can allow you to do that. However, it can also lead to things like compensatory eating, whereby they create a calorie deficit across the course of the week and then they completely eliminate it by eating 2 hamburgers and a pizza. And that happens. You see it happening. The other thing that happens is, as well is that because you were having low calories across the course of the week and you might have that large meal at the weekend, you might see a reduction in exercise performance as people's muscle glycogen stores become depleted. Okay, so we have to be mindful of that. Other strategies you might utilize are things like 5-2 or 24-hour fasting. I've done this myself. I did it in previous years when I was getting ready for competition. That's one there. The problem with 5-2 dieting and 24-hour fasting is you're not eating any food. So you create a severe deficit. So you're not getting any micronutrients, but you're also not getting any protein. And protein is not only satiating, but it's muscle preserving as well. So maybe not true fasting is what you need. Maybe you need to drip feed some amino acids to offset these things here. Again, you will see reductions in performance. I've done this 5-2 dieting and yeah, your performance goes down. It just does. Is there a psychological advantage for some of these approaches? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And giving people rules can help. So you can maybe say, these are the foods you should have on your cheat day or your refeed day. Now, in terms of energy intake for dieting, if you get it wrong, you see more negative adaptations. And this is where you can get in a situation that we call REDS, which is relative energy deficiency syndrome. And it can be voluntary or involuntary. It can be the case that you've restricted your energy intake to become leaner to improve your performance, and you've done that on purpose. Or involuntary, whereby you've started doing more activity but not adjusted your energy intake to compensate for that more activity that you've done. And maybe your intention was never to actually lose weight, yeah, in the first place. So when it comes to working with your athletes, you have to be mindful of these things, because as well as trying to maintain performance, we have to try and maintain athletes' health as much as possible. It's not just about muscle mass. We need to consider their longevity, and sometimes you need to protect the athletes as well from themselves, because they'll just go and do way more activity than otherwise they should be doing. Now, REDS used to be called the Female Athlete Triad. It's since evolved. It used to be all about low bone mineral density, low energy availability, and then menstrual dysfunction, right? So amenorrhea, for example, so loss of the menstrual cycle. But it now fits into this REDS model here. And it's not just about the female athlete. You see this in the male athlete as well, whereby you get GI problems, depression, loss of estrogen and testosterone production, anemia, brain fog, reduction in blood pressure, definitely an increased chance of injury and reductions in performances and increase in infections, right? So you see these things as people get leaner and leaner and leaner, and if they get too lean, they can definitely suffer from a lot of these symptoms. We call this REDS. So how many calories should someone consume? Well, if you know the timeline is going to be between about 28 to 28 weeks, something in the region, if you do your energy requirement calculation, you're going to get a number between around about 25 to 30 calories per kilogram of body weight. If we start going lower than this, this is where we might start seeing the negative effects of REDS, because we're not meeting our body's energy requirements, and it'll get exacerbated as we get leaner and leaner and leaner, okay? And this is based on a paper by Fagerberg that suggested that this was a number, and other research that I have done as well. And we've got the White Cliffs of Dover there because it is a cliff edge. There will be a point, I think, like the spring-loaded model, whereby you pass a certain threshold and then that's it. We start to see a lot of these negative adaptations based around body fat and weight loss. So how should you split your macros? These are other questions. Okay, here's a summary on this. This is just everything that I've just said, so I'm going to move on now. Some practical takeaways based on that. We should always be trying to maximize performance. Enjoyment of a diet matters as well, and enjoyment of the process. We should be trying to maintain muscle mass and maximize fat loss. Adherence is important. The more food they've got in their diet, the better they're going to adhere, right? If you smash very low calories, people find that very hard. If they've got a lot of calories to eat, they're more likely to be able to stick to a plan. We want to, when we design diets, make them as easy as you can to follow. So we want to make them nutritious and healthy and around food choices that they enjoy having. If we've got a good lead time coming into some sort of event, e.g. like a year, and we can plan, that reduces the time pressure. So we can really get slow weight loss over time. We can introduce concepts like diet breaks, and we can plan. If we've got 6 weeks or 5 weeks to get ready for an event, then you've got time pressures, and then you're maybe really having to work hard to get the fat off as well, right? Few other things, probably structure energy intake around training, and you can also structure energy intake around demanding sessions. As I've mentioned already, there are, however, different approaches you can take, and we need to individualize it because there's lots of different ways to get to Rome or get your outcome, right? And there is a argument for this dieting hard and fast approach, so you get in and get out, to reduce the diet length, minimize that diet fatigue, and then potentially that's what works best with an individual, yeah? Is this favoured amongst steroid users? Well, anecdotally, it seems like most Mr. Olympias and people competing in those events take this kind of approach because they're potentially not risking as much muscle mass loss. Why diet longer than you actually have to? Okay, so that's energy intake. What about the micronutrients? This is something that people don't often talk about. So we've mentioned energy balance, but let's talk about the micronutrients and food qualities and food groups, okay? Now, if you pause this video for a second, you've got 2 meals. Might have exactly the same protein, carbohydrate, and fat content, but which one is best for you and which one will affect your performance negatively and what's likely to be the most positive? Think about it, right? And then why is it best? Because I bet you can probably answer this question quite easily. And if the protein, carbohydrates, and fat's the same, well, does it matter? How would you all feel after you've had a McDonald's? I know that I would break out in spots. I know that this would upset my stomach, probably have diarrhea. I probably feel sluggish. I probably feel hungry a few hours later, and I probably wouldn't be satisfied by eating it, right? Now, the reason that is the case is because they're not the same, okay? Not only are they probably not the same in terms of protein, carbohydrate, and fat, because prediction equations and tables and things like that can't match them. There's also differences in the nutrient quality, e.g. the micronutrients, vitamins and minerals, fiber content, the satiation index, the effects on our glycemic index, the types of amino acids and things like that we'd have in here as well, sugars and fats. So there is a difference. Now, if you go around the world and you look at every health organization, no matter where you go, you'll see something that looks like this. So we've got the UK, you've got America, you've got Australia, you've got the Mediterranean diet, you've got Japan there, right? They all say the same thing. Around about 30 to 50% of your diet should come from fruits and vegetables of a variety of different colors. Diet should be high in whole grains, and we should be trying to maximize whole foods as much as possible. Some recommendations don't even include ultra-processed foods in their graphics. So they actually say you probably shouldn't really be eating this stuff because it's not good for you, right? So that everything in moderation message isn't the message anymore, right? It's actually probably don't eat this stuff. It's not good for you, right? This is how you should eat. You should have diets that look like this. The proportion of protein, carbohydrates, and fat should be different. But generally speaking, if we choose these food types, then we're going to perform well, right? A healthy diet is a high performance diet. You'll never go wrong with a healthy diet. Okay? In terms of what bodybuilders eat, well, based on papers, we know they consume around about 10 to 13 different food items. That's it. One type of broccoli, one type of, for a vegetable, maybe they're eating yogurt and whey, one type of starch, a couple of different types of cereal, so maybe oats and rice. A lot of them don't really eat fruit. Eggs are used, some of them are going to eat one type of fish, and so on, right? So bodybuilders' diets kind of look like this. These are the different things that they're doing, but they have low food diversity. They're only eating around about 13 different food items. And the World Cancer Research Foundation recommends that you eat 30 different types of fruits and vegetables a week. Different types. So certainly your average gym goer and your average bodybuilder isn't doing that. And we should definitely be trying to push towards that with our athletes for maximizing performance. This is guidance around the world. You can see Greece, Australia, United Kingdom. A portion is 80 grams in the UK. That's what a portion is, right? So the thing you want to ask yourself is, could you perform better with 7 to 10 portions? And are you eating at least 5 portions a day? The message is 5 portions in the UK, really probably because it's very simple to market. Got 5 fingers. Doesn't seem too out of reach, pun intended, for a lot of people. Most people are not getting the 5. In fact, I think it's only around about 20% of the population get that 5 portions per day. So we should be making the cornerstone of our diet probably around about 600 grams of veggies at least, but more ideally, so upwards of that 800 grams. And there's good reason we want to eat those fruits and veggies. We don't only want the fiber content of it, but we want the vitamins and minerals. We want to be able to perform. And this is especially true when we're trying to lose weight, when calories are limited. Because when calories are limited and we have low calorific efficiency, we're more likely to get nutritional deficiencies. And I've listed some of these on here. You can have a little look on here. But you want to offset potential reds. We want to make sure that people feel energized, that they're getting everything they need. And if they eat high quality diets, then they're more likely to get better quality nutrition rather than if they're consuming ultra processed foods, which are energy dense and nutrient poor. The other thing to mention is fat metabolism and energy metabolism is influenced by our vitamin and mineral intake. So lots of B vitamins are involved in this process. So it's really important that we consume vitamins and minerals from just this perspective alone. We don't want to be suffering from any deficiencies. And when you work with a lot of athletes trying to lose weight, they often complain about tiredness. They often complain about things like anemia, or rather have fatigue, which could be anemia. They have weak hair, nails. They might talk about getting cut easily and bruising easily. They might talk about getting more colds. And a lot of this could be down to just a poor quality diet. So we want to encourage fruits and vegetable intake. Here's some deficiency diseases you can see here as well. Now, lots of exercise supplements are rich in vitamins and minerals and plant phenolic compounds. And you'll buy them when you could just be getting them as part of your diet. So lots of polyphenolic compounds are what you find in fruits and vegetables. These are what give fruits and vegetables their colors. And these are all things which might potentially influence your performance in a positive way. So rather than maybe perhaps taking a beet capsule or a blackcurrant capsule or citrulline mally or tart cherry juice, all these things which might improve your performance, you could just eat the stuff as part of a healthy diet and get the additive effect from there. And I've said this. Okay. The other part of this is that fruits and vegetables are very satiating. Okay? They contain soluble and insoluble fiber, right? Now, we've got benefits of both insoluble and soluble. Forget about categorizing these into benefits, one being specific to the other. These are across the board. Both are good for your colon health. Both influence transit time, so prevent you getting constipation, etc. Both will improve your blood sugar levels, your cholesterol, help you stay fuller for longer, right? The fiber content is directly related to the appearance of the sugar in your bloodstream and to the satiation properties of the food item that you're eating, right? Low quality ingredients have got poor micronutrient compositions, they've got poor phenolic compounds, they've got poor satiation profiles, they've got poor fiber profiles as well, right? So we need to consider these things being negative for our gut health at the same time. And I include those food items because those are all very popular amongst gym-going populations. People find excuses to eat these things. There's potential use cases, but certainly when we're losing weight, we probably want to minimize the intake. You can look at food items as well in lots of different ways. You've got the DNOVA ultra-processed food rating system. France has got its own system. In the UK, we use the traffic light system as well. But they all kind of come out the same way, right? Red is bad, green is good. The more processed that food item, the worse it is likely for your health. Word ultra-processed food makes sense. Multi-event sports, so if you are doing triathlon or heptathlon or something like that, and you're doing 10 events or 5 events in a day, you want to refuel between sessions. If you're doing strongman, you want to refuel between sessions. If you're doing long distance events, running, cycling, you want to get rapidly quick digesting carbohydrates. If you're just in the gym for 60 to 90 minutes, resting between sets, the demand isn't there. We don't really need rapid refueling, okay? Dental caries, we need to think about this as well because we don't want our teeth getting damaged. So we can definitely make better food choices under different circumstances. Okay. Micronutrients, they're good for our health. They can potentially improve our performance, health, and fat loss. As we lose weight and we get particularly lean, we need to make sure that we're guarding our micronutrient intake and really prioritizing the quality of our foods. Fruits and vegetables have got a much higher satiation value, much better thermic effect, better for your gut properties, and they also prevent energy spikes and have better health outcomes than ultra-processed foods. We should be aiming for about 30 portions a week, fruits and vegetables. That's about, and at least 5 portions a day, although up to 7 to 10, I think, should be where we're going to go. When you start thinking about this, you realize that this type of dieting necessitates a higher carbohydrate approach, because you can't eat lots of fruits and vegetables and still follow a low carb approach. It's difficult to do. Okay, what about the macronutrients? Well, when it comes to macronutrients, and this is again research coming from my physique sport athletes, and when we're talking about weight loss, people understand that protein's important and that we need to have protein in our diet to preserve muscle tissue. They also know that more protein you eat, the fuller they feel for longer, right? So that's an advantage. You might actually eat over and above what you really need in terms of protein just to keep you filled up, right? Carbohydrates, we need that for anaerobic performance because we produce lactic acid. That's the direct breakdown of carbohydrate. So you need it for that. You need it for energy and cognition. You need obviously the carbohydrate foods because they're associated with those high fiber foods that we just mentioned. Also good sources of water-soluble vitamins. Fats, important for energy, aerobic performance, hormonal production, and for fat-soluble vitamins. Depending on who you ask, they'll tell you one is more important than the other, fats or carbohydrates. At the end of the day, when it comes to dieting, you're going to need to reduce something. And usually it comes from fat or carbohydrate, and that can often be down to athlete individual preference or nutritionist individual preference at the end of the day, right? In terms of macronutrients, this is how bodybuilders ate in the studies that I looked at, right? So between around about 3.65 grams per kilogram of body weight from carbohydrates, which goes to show that you can lose weight on a higher carbohydrate diet. Protein between 2.7 to 3.3, so very high protein diet, and then a relatively low fat diet, 0.6 to 0.9, so probably less than UK recommendations. Now, it's all relative because these people were losing weight. So they weren't necessarily increasing the absolute amounts. It's just that the absolute amount was that the relative amount was going up as they lost weight, right? So you're not necessarily seeing an increase in that respect as well. But you can see in this study, certainly the bodybuilders were prioritizing protein and carbohydrates over the fats, which makes sense for a really anaerobic based activity. Okay, so what protein you on, bro? Well, protein's important, and lots of athletes, they get this. It's satiating, and it helps them build muscle tissue. How much protein should you eat? Well, probably if you're trying to lose weight, somewhere around about 2.0 grams per kilogram of body weight. Recommendations are for high quality based protein, that is animal based sources. If you look at the literature, what you see is protein has a positive effect on muscle protein synthesis, thereby also having a positive effect on maintaining muscle protein as you lose weight. We've got a cell signaling pathway down here. Amino acids, they interact with something that we call mTOR. mTOR then tells your body to build more protein tissue. Combine that with exercise, you build even more. The thing about protein is, can you get the same effect by eating at the lower end of the threshold, e.g. 2.0 grams, compared to the high end of the threshold, 3.3 grams? And if you can do that, then you can maybe take some of that extra protein that you've got and you can add it to your carbohydrates and your fats and improve performance. So these are the questions that I always kind of ask. This is just more evidence that talks about protein and the maintenance effect of protein. So bed rest studies and space flight studies show that people lose muscle if you rest them in a bed for a month or when they go to space. If you have enough protein, this maintains the muscle mass, right? The focus is always though on proteins rich in essential amino acids. That is animal-based sources, so dairy, eggs, animal flesh. These seem to have higher essential amino acid content than vegetable-based sources. Now, if you go around the world, you can go to the IOC, so the International Olympic Committee, American College of Sports Medicine, or the ISSN, and these are the guidelines around fat loss specificity of how much protein they recommend. So you can see here, if you maintained around about 2.3 grams per kilogram of body weight, then you're probably meeting your protein requirements. However, there's always new research coming out. There's always a range of specific recommendations on this particular front. When it comes to not losing weight, the actual targets are less. You don't need quite as much because your demands are not as high. Protein is the most satiating nutrient. So on the right-hand side here, the big graphic with the black bars, you'll see that protein-rich foods are further up on our satiation index. So if you go further down the scale, you see that protein feeds you fuller for longer. Hyperpalatable foods, refined foods actually do the worst here, you can see, compared to the higher quality fiber-rich foods on here. You've got some other graphs on here, the satiation score. You can see as the protein goes up per serving, so does the satiation that you see as well. And this is particularly also true of fiber, carbohydrates, and fats. You don't see the same thing. The other thing to mention is that water actually is quite satiating. It seems to fill you up. Protein quality can be measured in lots of different ways. You can look at protein digestibility corrected amino acid scores. You can look at leucine contents. You can look at amino acid profiles specifically, and you can look at growth indices. Sometimes as well, you might be interested in what is the total protein content per 100 gram versus the calorie intake. There's lots of different ways you can look at this. One or two might show that actually a soya-based protein drink does better, but on the whole, animal-based protein products, generally speaking, always come out on top. Hence the recommendation that essential amino acids, or rather that animal-based products, are best for maintaining muscle mass. This is a famous study here comparing different types of protein. So we've got wheat, soya, egg, and whey, and the effect on fractional synthetic rate. This is protein synthesis. And you can see that whey comes out on top. That's a dairy. If you compare whey versus WGG, which is a wheat protein, then whey does better. If you take wheat-based protein, you add leucine to it, which is an essential amino acid, you can get the same effect of whey when you match it gram for gram. So if 30 grams of protein versus 30 grams of protein from animal-based sources versus vegetable-based sources, the animal-based source comes out on top. If you add an essential amino acid in it, which is rich in the animal-based source, to that vegetable-based source, you can make up the deficit. Here are some good protein sources, although I should mention that chickpeas, black beans, almonds, etc. don't account for the total calories. So although you might get you could get 20 grams of protein per 100 grams of almonds, you also might get 400 calories versus, say, only 120 from the chicken breast. So calorific efficiency matters, particularly when you've got the calories to spare when you're dieting. Other concepts, people have suggested that because every time you consume amino acids, particularly essential amino acids, you see an increase in protein synthesis, that we have periods of anabolism and catabolism, whereby our protein machinery is switched on and then it turns off after a while. So every single meal, we get that machinery turned on. If we can maintain that anabolism over the course of the day or for longer, then we build more muscle mass. This also gives us opportunity for nighttime protein, so we can get something that's slow digesting. This might be another approach that we could take. I don't have time to go into detail on this, but it's an interesting idea. Certainly when it comes to fasting. So if you imagine you just had your essential amino acids, triggered protein synthesis, despite the fact not really eating a great deal over the course of a day, apart from just your essential amino acids, maybe this is a way you can preserve more muscle. Long term, the effects of a plant-based diet versus an animal-based diet, it's difficult. There's not enough research on this, but it looks like the minor differences in amino acid content don't necessarily translate into differences in muscle mass solid. So vegetarian and vegans don't need to be concerned. Plus, they're also consuming diets which are high in micronutrients. And as I've just discussed, that's a good thing. So here we go. Here's our protein summary. Athletes probably should consume around about between 2 to 3.3 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight if we're looking to lose weight. Building muscle needs less, so between 1.6 to 2. Quality and timing probably get more important as athletes get leaner. So if you've got a really lean athlete, this sort of stuff really probably starts to matter more to maintain that 1/4 rule. There's likely differences between elite athletes as well in the general population, okay? Differences between plant and animal protein, well, it's often calorific efficiency. It's very easy to get a high protein, low fat, low carbohydrate protein from an animal-based source. Not so easy when we're looking at vegetable proteins. Protein in general, just be mindful of allergies, nuts, soya, dairy, shellfish, that sort of thing. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up here and then take a break, and then I'm going to go on and talk about carbohydrates. Hopefully you found this interesting though so far.